Hi, everyone. Melody from Learning in Progress here, and I'm so thrilled to be able to share my fourth webinar with you. Just to recap, in August, we focused on how to increase student engagement during live virtual lessons. September was all about differentiated instruction, specifically using Nearpod and digital choice boards. Last month in October, we had a lot of fun and we played Halloween virtual games to learn how to plan and implement virtual parties for your students. And this month, we are focusing on phonics instruction. So, this is really meant for literacy coaches, primary teachers, support providers, and administrators. So, welcome, and let's go ahead and get started. So we started with a poll, and this poll, I just wanted to get to know our participants. So as expected, we had mostly primary grade teachers. We had some literacy coaches, a couple instructional coaches, and I believe we even had an administrator. So a little bit of everything, but mostly primary grade. Little bit about me for those of you who this is your first recording. My name is Melody. I am the founder of Learning in Progress. I am also a teacher. So I teach and have a TPT business. I have taught, oh gosh, every grade and in many different positions. You name it, I've probably had that job. I am currently a sixth grade teacher, and last year I was a reading interventionist. So I mostly worked with kindergarten and first graders. As I mentioned, I also have a TPT store, a blog, and I actually just started a YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked it out, please go ahead and subscribe. I am doing Teacher Tip Tuesdays as well as posting these recordings. In addition to being a classroom teacher, I have been an intervention specialist, a reading specialist, and an ed tech mentor. I have also been fortunate enough to present at both local conferences and national conferences, mostly on differentiated instruction, but I have also presented on reading strategies. So first we went over a little bit of our Zoom norms. I always do this whenever I do a Zoom or Google Meet lesson, whether it's with adults or with my students. Now, I recommend if you are a virtual teacher to go ahead and check out the Nearpod lesson I am showing here. It is an introduction to virtual meetings. It's a great way to go over expectations and norms with your kiddos before diving into instruction. So the objectives of this webinar. We have 4 objectives. 1, I'm going to go over how to assign Nearpod lessons. There's a couple different ways to do so. 2, we'll talk about some strategies and how those reading strategies can be incorporated into a Nearpod lesson. And 3, I'll share some tips and tidbits on how we can use Nearpod to differentiate. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you, and I'm going to walk you through the different ways that you can use Nearpod in your classroom. Here's my Nearpod library, and you can see there's a lot going on. So I've been a Nearpod user for a very long time. And you can see here that I have folders, there's subfolders, they're color-coded. So those of you that are getting started with Nearpod, I highly recommend using these organizational tools that they have for us. Let's look at some phonics lessons. I'm going to open up my long vowels lessons. Let's go ahead and look at long E. So here you can see I have 4 levels of Nearpod lessons that target the long E sound. I have a red group, so this is for my intervention kids. An orange group for my kids that maybe often need a reteach. They're not quite at grade level, but they're close. Green group is at grade level. They are ready to learn those skills and apply them to both reading and writing. And then blue group for my gifted kiddos that really need that challenge. So I'm going to pretend like I'm assigning an intervention lesson. So I'm going to go to that red group, and you can see that there's 3 options. The live participation option is meant for Google Meets lessons, Zoom lessons, Microsoft Teams, any situation where you and your students are online at the same time learning. There's also a student pace. So this is great for if you want to, for instance, send independent work, whether it be classwork, if you're distance learning, or homework, if you need your students to practice after school hours. And last, there's the live participation in Zoom. So this is, you can see it's in beta, but this is especially beneficial if you're working with younger students. You can send one link to families, and that single link will open both Zoom and your Nearpod lesson. Now, I want to mention a couple of things about these different options here. First, student paced. I highly recommend recording your voice, especially if you're working with non-readers. So this webinar is really meant for primary grade students, which of course are not independent readers yet. So all of my lessons in my TPT store for Phonics have my voice recording the instructions so that they can do these lessons truly on their own. Live participation, the teacher controls the screen. So you won't have a situation where students are, going at their own pace, quick, or going backwards. This is a great option. Either if you're a distance learning teacher, you can still control their screens, even when you're not in the same building. Or it's ideal if you want to do a whole group lesson in class. Now, for those of you that are hybrid teachers or you're in a classroom and you need to be socially distanced, this is a great option because you can control their screens from your desk and everyone will stay at your pace. So I want to go over a couple of different ways that we can assign Nearpod. So students can either use a laptop, a Chromebook, a desktop, any one of those options, and they will actually split the screen. I highly recommend going over this task before your lesson. So making sure that families at home understand how to resize their windows. Another option is if your students are going to use a tablet or an iPad, go ahead and use two devices. So especially if you want your kids to practice physically writing, I recommend going with this option and letting your students or their families know that they'll need a second device, such as a cell phone, where they can log into Zoom, Google Meet, or Microsoft Teams. Now, I do want to mention Zoom games. I've gotten so many questions, and they're great questions, about how we can celebrate the holidays, Halloween, winter holidays, Valentine's Day. How can we have those fun activities and events for our students if we're not in the same room? And this is a great way to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what I do so that you can use it to help celebrate the holidays with your students. I have a growing bundle right now. And so by the end of the year, or July, I should say, this bundle will include one Nearpod lesson for every one of those holidays. And they have matching activities, drawing activities, time to climb games. They have Pictionary contests, things like that. So all I would do is I would pull up a digital spinner. I do have some Halloween spinners in my store, more to come for other holidays. I would pull up a digital spinner. I would share my screen and spin the wheel. Whatever activity it lands on, that's what activity I would pull up on Nearpod. So for example, I would spin the spinner and maybe it lands on a drawing activity. I would then click the arrow and I would select the activity I want my students to do. And you can share that activity. And I got to tell you, my kids love this. My kinders and first graders last year were begging to play this game. It's a really fun way to celebrate the holidays, to have a little fun with each other. And I would even use these lessons during literacy centers. The kids love it. So next in the presentation, I asked participants what their go-to strategies were. Now you can see here that this was a collaboration board, and I have just a couple examples. Their names have been hidden so to protect their privacy, but I pulled up a couple examples to show. But before I get to that, I do want to show this because in the classroom, this is a lifesaver. Do you want to approve student comments? Yes. I recommend just always saying yes, because that way students can't post on the board before the teacher sees it. Very important. So we brainstormed some different strategies, and these strategies I'm actually going to be going over throughout the presentation. These are my go-to strategies, and like I mentioned, a lot of them were also mentioned by other participants in the webinar today. So my go-to strategies, I'm going to go over 4 specific strategies. 1, TPR, total physical response. 2, dictation. 3, chunking. And 4, highlighting. So first, total physical response. I cannot tell you how helpful this is to struggling readers. So I have found as an interventionist that many students who are struggling academically are often kinesthetic learners, meaning they need to move in order to retain information. The idea of TPR is that the kids are associating a skill with a movement. For example, when I taught my kinders how to read CVC words, we had a motion for every long vowel sound. So ah, I, eh, ah, and So what I would do is I pull up a word like dad, for instance, and I would have the students circle the vowel sound and then act out the sound. This is an ah word. We would then sound out and blend the words together. Once they had mastered that, I would give them a few words to do independently on their own. So here's an example of a draw it slide. So what the students would do is they take a pen from the bottom of their screen and they circle that ah sound. Then we would practice sounding out and blending the words together. Another way to use this draw it slide is for sight words. So as we know, many sight words do not follow phonics rules. So this is a great way to help that memorization. Have the students choose a color from the bottom of their screen. They'll trace the word, choose a different color, and then trace it again. I really like rainbow writing, especially for little ones. Strategy number 2 is dictation. So there are 4 different levels here. And I have my long vowels lessons as well as my consonant digraphs lessons are leveled. So the long vowels, for example, have 4 different levels. My intervention level is L cone in boxes, but the long A sound is missing. So they only have to practice writing 2 letters to represent that one single sound. My strategic group, the kids that need just a little bit more support, we use L Conan as well, but they have to come up with the 4 different letters that make the 3 sounds in rain. For benchmark, they are identifying the letters and the sounds. So what I would do first is I would count the sounds with them. Ain. And we know that middle sound is 2 letters, 1 sound. They would then write the 4 letters. And then for our kids that are gifted, they're fast learners, I would encourage them. This is kind of the opposite of chunking. They're going to take raindrop, spell rain, drop, and blend it. Raindrop. So this is an example of how we can use L cone in boxes. So I went ahead and made my boxes an image and inserted it as a background. The students are then instructed to write over these boxes. This is another level, and this I would consider the benchmark level. So again, they're figuring out how many sounds and how many letters make those sounds in the word day. Strategy 3, chunking, and I feel very passionately about this one. I strongly believe that students should be learning how to read two-syllable words at the same time as single-syllable words. What I have found through my experience with intervention is that when students are learning how to read one and two-syllable words at the same time, their fluency increases significantly. So sometimes there's a disconnect. When students learn how to, for instance, read the word coat and they're reading one syllable words, sometimes when they go to read an actual book, we're not seeing the same automaticity or fluency with it. It's not coming out as smooth reading because they're not used to seeing two-syllable words. I recommend teaching them at the same time. And it doesn't mean students are going to master two-syllable words right away, but being able to kind of sprinkle them throughout the year in first grade, for instance, allows them to see how to apply the individual phonics skills to a book or a sentence. Now, this is an example of how I introduce them in some of my phonics lessons. For instance, my long vowel lessons. Now, the first two are done, and I'm not going to play the audio, but there is audio on this slide that has me reminding students of how to break apart these words and sound them out. Often, there's a second slide where the students will actually draw, again using the pen tool, draw the lines underneath to break apart the word and then sound them out. Strategy 4, last but not least, highlighting. So this is really the application. Now, in my lessons, I include a leveled passage, but this technique can be used on single words, sentences, passages, or whole stories. And what it is students take a highlighter, in this case, a digital highlighter, and they highlight words that have that target sound. Let me show you on the next slide. So here you can see, this is an example of a passage, and this passage targets the long A sound. So students would take a digital highlighter, and they would highlight words that either have AY or AI. That way, when they go back to read it, their brain is already ready to make the A sound whenever they see the highlighted words. So that brings us to our last objective for this webinar, and that's differentiation. And I know I've mentioned this in previous webinars, and I did talk a little bit about it at the start of this one. This is my passion. I absolutely love to differentiate. I find this the most rewarding and most challenging aspect of being a teacher is trying to reach every unique student in your classroom. So what I've done in my store, my TPT store, several of my resources are differentiated. And my phonics resources, for instance, include 4 levels. Red for intervention, orange for strategic or near grade level, green for benchmark kids that are at grade level, and blue for kids that need a challenge. So here you can see examples of those 4 levels. Intervention this time has the OA in it. So it has that long O sound. And the kids are simply trying to find the letter at the beginning and the end. So their beginning sound, their ending sound. Strategic, again, L-cone in boxes, but they are identifying the letters for all 4 boxes. They already know that it's 4 letters, even though it makes 3 sounds. So now they just have to figure out which 4 letters. For benchmark, they are identifying the number of sounds, so ode, and they are identifying the 4 letters that make that sound. And then challenge, instead of just focusing on the long O, this word actually also has the long A. So I would teach this lesson after, of course, the students have been introduced to the long A. So instead of just spelling road, they're going to spell road, way, roadway. Another way to differentiate on these slides is back a few moments ago, we talked about circling that short A sound in the CVC word. I often like to change the words depending on my group. For instance, this came from a lesson that targeted the long E. For my intervention and strategic kids, I gave them more word like meal. It's got one single sound at the beginning, the long E sound, and then one single sound at the end. Whereas for my benchmark or challenge kids, I included a blend. So it's der, E, m. It's a bit more challenging of a word. You may also want to consider, depending on the level of your students, using a 2-syllable word instead of just a single word for those kids that need an extra challenge. Here's another fun way to differentiate. So I really enjoy the matching activities. It's a quick way to assess if your students are able to read the target phonics skill. And you can see that I, again, have 4 levels here. For my intervention students, the matching activities are single syllable words. So I just want to see if they're able to read words with that target sound. In this example, it's the long I sound. Strategic, single syllable words, but they're in sentences. So getting that little bit of application practice. Benchmark, these are starting to introduce 2-syllable words. And then, of course, they also have those sentences. And challenge incorporates both 2-syllable words and sentence reading. So this is a fun and easy way that you can differentiate, and everyone is practicing the same standard. However, it's the standard at their individual level. So this was a matching activity, and it's very similar to what we just looked at, but I wanted to show you the teacher screen. So here, I don't have anyone logged in with me at the moment, but if I did, you would see student names right here, and it would show you in real time how many correct matches they're getting. So if it's out of 12, for instance, you'll start seeing them change. One student might be 2 out of 12, and then 12 out of 12, 10 out of 12. And this part is very important. Right here, it tells you how many tries it took to get those correct. So while my kids are working on these matches, and I may give them like a minute, they're working on the matches, and I would actually have a pad of paper next to me, and I would write down any students that I need to meet with, perhaps later during intervention time, to review this lesson. Now, I do want to give a little teacher tidbit here. And those of you that watched my engagement webinar back in August, or if you joined me for the live presentation, I highly recommend 2 things. 1, giving a specific time frame for how long students need to finish an activity. 2, I recommend using music, especially for the younger learners. So I would, for instance, if I pulled up this slide, I would tell my students, you have 1 minute and a half to match as many words to pictures as you can. I would turn on a timed song to 1.5 minutes. That way, my students, there's a sense of urgency. They know that they have a certain amount of time. And even if they don't know what a minute and a half is, if you use the same song every time you say a minute and a half, they will learn the song, and so they will know when their time is ending. Another way to differentiate is to play time to climb. Now, oh my goodness, if you take away one thing from this webinar, please take this away. Your kids will love it. It's a race up a mountain. Teachers have control over what questions are being asked, whether you're using pictures or text. It is a lot of fun. Now, you can use this feature either in student paced or a live lesson. So if you use it in student paced, the students, of course, play on their own because they're in charge of the pacing of their lesson, but they are able to see at the end if they got first, second, or third place. If you're doing this during a live lesson, you'll see, for instance, if you look at the screen, you can see my character there. I'm kind of a lone wolf in this example. But if you do this during a live lesson, you'll see all of your students, and they all race up the mountain. It's very exciting. So I use this as my exit ticket. This is something that I use to fully check their understanding. Are they able to read that sentence that has the target skill? What's great about this is at the end of the lesson, all of this data is saved so you can review it at any time or even share it with parents, administrators, or co-teachers if you need some evidence of learning. So I just want to show you what the game looks like. So what's fun is you can choose the background. It could be space themed, underwater, the mountains. And actually, last month in October, this was so exciting. I didn't realize this was coming. There was a Halloween theme. So what a fun way to add some festive cheer into your literacy centers. I'm going to go ahead and choose underwater just so that you can see what it looks like from the teacher's side. So at this point, I would instruct my students to choose a character and click on start. Then you would see characters and student names popping up on the screen. And what's great, if you're playing this during a live virtual meeting, you can see how many students have chosen the character. So I would even say like, okay, I have 15 students logged in. I'm waiting for 10 more or whatever it is. Now, at the end of the game, and you won't be able to see it here because, again, for the purposes of this webinar or this recording, I should say, it's just me on here. But if I had other students on here, I would click on start and then the race would begin. So we would go through each question and they of course answer independently. And at the end of the game, it shows who got first, second, and third. It is very exciting and the students love it. So everything that you have seen in this differentiation section, they're all available in two unique bundles. One is the Nearpod lessons on their own. So I sell my leveled lessons for each individual vowel sound. And then, of course, there's the bundle that includes all of the vowel sounds A, E, I, O, and U. Or if you are looking for something that you can use at all literacy centers, for instance, like Daily 5, you might want a worksheets for word work or some independent practice. And then, of course, there's tech time. This is great if you're a hybrid teacher, if you're looking for even homework to send after your lesson, or, of course, if you're looking for both worksheets and something techy that the kids can do during literacy center rotations. Now, I do want to mention this because this is my Ultra Bundle. It's actually new, and it includes everything I've created for Phonics so far, which is a ton of resources. So if you're looking either for inspiration or you really want to see what's available so that you can choose a resource that specifically meets the needs of your class, I recommend starting here because it includes everything from my differentiated literacy worksheets, my differentiated Nearpod lessons, my fluency worksheets. There's a monthly bundle. My holiday games are in there, and everything in this bundle is differentiated. So go ahead and take a look at that. It's in my TPT store, and that's a good place to start. So at this point, we kind of just shared our biggest takeaways or what we wanted to incorporate into our classrooms this week or next week. So I want to pause for a minute. I'm not going to share their answers, but I want you to choose one action step. A lot of times, I myself included, teachers go to professional development, they attend a webinar, and feel a bit overwhelmed. I have done that too. So I want you to take one thing that you would like to incorporate into your classroom this week and just write it down. If you have other goals, put them in a separate list. So don't overwhelm yourself. Teachers are overwhelmed as it is. Don't overwhelm yourself. Make a do now list and a do later list. I then asked them what topic they would like to see in future webinars. I would love to hear your ideas. I really love doing these monthly webinars, and I want to make sure that they're really addressing the needs of my fellow educators. So if you have an idea or a topic that you would love to learn more about, either shoot me an email, I'll share my address in just a few minutes, or go ahead and add in your idea in the comments section on this page. All right, so webinar bundles, very exciting. If you are like me and you're just so thrilled and eager to incorporate Nearpod into your classroom, I highly recommend this bundle. It'll give you a sampling of everything we covered here today, and these resources are specifically targeted for kindergarten. So you'll get one Nearpod lesson for the short A, E, I, O, and U. You'll get a Kinder Choice board and then also a word chains lesson. Now for today and tomorrow only, that's November 14th and November 15th. This bundle will only be $20. After that, starting November 16th, it's gonna bump up a little bit in price. So if you're eager to take advantage of this offer, make sure you get this in the next couple days. Phonics. So this is meant for a little bit older primary students. So definitely targets first grade standards, also great for second grade. But I've also used these lessons as third grade intervention. So consider that if you're an intervention teacher or you have some students that really need that targeted phonics instruction. This bundle is going to include the consonant digraphs lesson, the Magic E review lesson, one Nearpod lesson for every long vowel, A, E, I, O, and U, and then also a word chains lesson. Now, attendees that participated in my live webinar today got an additional Nearpod lesson, and that Nearpod lesson was a review of all long vowels. For today and tomorrow only, this is $20. But starting on Monday, it will also include that long vowels review and the price will increase. So make sure you take advantage of this before Monday. If you are new to the Learning in Progress community, please go ahead and join my email list. Every month, I send out some free resources. Every month in your inbox, you will get the next month's supply of newsletters. They are predated for 2021. I know I for sure love having them predated. They're also seasonally designed, so make sure to take advantage of that. In addition, if you're on my email list, I often give information of upcoming free webinars, giveaways that I do, raffles that I do, so make sure to join to get that information. So that brings us to the end of this recorded webinar, and thank you again for watching and joining me today. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I love collaborating with educators across the country, and I'm more than happy to help you get started with Nearpod. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope to see you at my next webinar on December 12th. Bye, everyone.